David loved Tuesdays. It was delivery day for his art supplies. He was a painter, and Tuesdays meant fresh canvases, new tubes of paint, and sometimes a surprise brush or two. He worked from home, which meant comfy clothes were a must. Today, that meant his oldest, softest robe, the one his sister said made him look like a friendly bear. He hummed a little tune as he waited, glancing at the clock every few minutes. The doorbell usually rang around 10. It was now 10:15. Maybe the delivery was running late. He wandered into the kitchen to make a cup of tea, figuring he had a few more minutes to relax. Suddenly, the doorbell chimed. He hurried to the door, expecting to see Mr. Henderson, the usual delivery guy, with a stack of boxes. Instead, standing on his porch was a girl. Not just any girl, but a girl who looked like sunshine and smiles, even though she was smirking. She couldn't have been older than 18. David's eyes widened. He definitely wasn't expecting this. His robe, which had been loosely tied, seemed to loosen even further. He hadn't even bothered to brush his hair. He felt a blush creep up his neck. He was so not prepared for company, especially not this kind of company. "Looking for someone?" David managed to ask, his voice a little higher than usual. He tugged at the robe, trying to make it seem like he always answered the door looking like this. The girl's smirk widened. It wasn't mean, but it was definitely mischievous. "Maybe," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Are you David?" He nodded. "Yes. And you are?" "That's not important right now," she replied, tilting her head. "I need to ask you something. Can I come in?" David's mind raced. Who was this girl? And why was she here? He barely knew anyone his sister hadn't set him up with, and this girl definitely wasn't one of those. He hesitated. Letting a stranger into his house, especially when he was half-dressed, seemed like a terrible idea. But there was something about her confidence, her playful eyes, that made him pause. Before he could form a coherent answer, she stepped forward, pushing the door open a little wider. "Thanks," she said, already halfway inside. "Don't worry, I don't bite, unless you asked me to." David's jaw dropped. He quickly grabbed the door to prevent it from swinging shut. He was officially out of his depth. "Wait. Just a second," David stammered, his hand still on the door. "Who are you, and what do you want?" He needed to regain some control of the situation, even if his robe was failing him miserably. The girl, now fully inside, turned to face him, a playful glint in her eyes. "My name is Sarah," she said, finally offering a piece of information. "And what I want?" "Depends." David's eyebrows shot up. "Depends on what?" Sarah took a step closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Depends on whether you're going to be boring or interesting." He felt his face flush again. This was definitely not how he expected his Tuesday to go. Usually it was just him, his paints, and the occasional squirrel peering in through the window. Now, he had a mysterious, confident 18-year-old in his living room, judging his potential for excitement. He cleared his throat. I don't know what you mean," he said, which was a complete lie. He had a feeling he knew exactly what she meant, and it both terrified and intrigued him. He needed to figure out why Sarah was really here. Was it a prank? A mistaken address? Or something else entirely? He decided to try a different approach. "Okay, Sarah," he said, trying to sound more assertive. "Let's start from the beginning. Why are you here?" Sarah strolled further into the living room, seemingly unfazed by David's question. She stopped in front of one of his paintings, a vibrant landscape filled with swirling colors. "You're a painter," she stated, more of an observation than a question. "Yes," David replied, feeling slightly relieved that the conversation was moving away from the awkwardness of her initial arrival. "I am." "It's good," she said, tilting her head to examine the painting from different angles. "It makes me feel like I'm actually there." David felt a warmth spread through him. Compliments on his art were always welcome, especially from someone who seemed to have an eye for detail. "Thank you," he said, genuinely pleased. But then, Sarah turned back to him, her smirk returning. But that's not why I'm here, she said, shattering the brief moment of comfortable conversation. Although, maybe it could be part of it. David sighed inwardly. He was back to square one. Sarah, please, he pleaded. Just tell me why you're here. Are you selling something? Are you lost? Do you need help? Sarah chuckled. I'm not selling anything, I'm definitely not lost, and I don't need help, she said. I'm here because… Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? She paused, her eyes locking with his. Let's just say I'm here to shake things up a little. David ran a hand through his already messy hair. Shake things up? What does that even mean? He felt like he was in some kind of strange movie, where he was the clueless character and Sarah was the mysterious, all-knowing one. Sarah grinned, her eyes sparkling with amusement. It means I think you need a little adventure in your life, David. You seem comfortable. She gestured around the room. Too comfortable, maybe. David looked around his living room. It was cozy, filled with his paintings, comfortable furniture, and stacks of books. It was his sanctuary, his happy place. Was it really that boring? And what makes you think I need you to provide that adventure? He asked, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. Sarah shrugged. Maybe you don't. But I'm here now, aren't I? And you haven't kicked me out yet. She walked over to his bookshelf, running her finger along the spines. Lots of classics. Dickens, Austen. Very safe choices. David felt a surge of annoyance. Who was she to judge his taste in books? Or his life, for that matter? But beneath the annoyance, there was a tiny spark of curiosity. Maybe she was right. Maybe his life had become a little too predictable. So, Sarah said, turning back to him with a challenging look. What do you say, David? Are you ready to be shaken? David hesitated. Was he ready to be shaken? The thought was both terrifying and exciting. He looked at Sarah, standing there with her challenging gaze, and realized he didn't have a good answer. Okay, he said slowly. I'm listening. What kind of shaking are we talking about here? Sarah clapped her hands together, a wide smile spreading across her face. Excellent! I was hoping you'd say that. She paused, her expression becoming more serious. Okay, so here's the deal. My grandma lives next door. David blinked. Your grandma? This was not what he expected. Yeah, my grandma, Sarah confirmed. She's a bit of a handful. She broke her wrist last week and needs help with a few things around the house, but she's too stubborn to ask for help herself. She also really loves having people over, but can't do it herself right now. So I thought, why not combine the two? Combine the two? David repeated, still trying to process this sudden shift in the conversation. Yeah. I'm thinking you could help her with a few things, maybe carry some boxes, reach some high shelves, and then just hang out with her for a bit. Tell her about your paintings, maybe play a game of checkers. It would really make her day. Sarah's smile was now genuine, and her eyes pleaded with him. What do you say? Are you in? David stared at Sarah, completely taken aback. This was definitely not the grand adventure he had imagined. Helping an elderly woman with chores? It was surprisingly ordinary. Your grandma? He repeated, still processing the information. You came here, barged into my house, and implied all sorts of things, just to ask me to help your grandma? Sarah nodded, her expression earnest. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds a little crazy, she admitted. But I knew if I just knocked on your door and asked nicely, you'd probably say no. You seemed like the kind of person who likes their routine. David couldn't argue with that. He did like his routine. But something about Sarah's genuine concern for her grandmother tugged at his heartstrings. He thought of his own grandmother, who lived far away and whom he didn't get to see often enough. What's your grandma's name? He asked, a smile starting to form on his face. Agnes, Sarah replied, her eyes lighting up. And she makes the best cookies in the world. Seriously, you have to try them. David chuckled. Okay, Agnes and her amazing cookies. I'm intrigued. But I'm still in my robe, he pointed out, gesturing to his attire. And I haven't had my tea yet. Those are minor details, Sarah said dismissively. Agnes needs help now. Besides, she added with a wink, I think you look rather dashing in your robe. David laughed. Dashing? I think you're being overly generous. He glanced down at his robe, suddenly seeing it in a new light. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. So, are you going to help Agnes or not? Sarah pressed, her voice filled with anticipation. All right, David conceded, raising his hands in mock surrender. Give me 5 minutes to change and grab my tea, and then I'm all yours. I mean, all Agnes's. He blushed slightly at his slip-up. Sarah grinned. 5 minutes it is. I'll go let Agnes know you're coming. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and David? Don't bother changing into anything too fancy. Agnes isn't easily impressed by clothes. She cares more about a kind heart. With that, she slipped out the door, leaving David standing alone in his living room, a mixture of amusement and bewilderment swirling inside him. He couldn't believe how quickly his Tuesday had taken such a strange turn. He hurried to his bedroom, a smile playing on his lips. He still didn't know exactly what he was getting himself into, but he had a feeling this was going to be a very interesting day. And maybe, just maybe, Sarah was right. Maybe he did need a little shaking up after all. He quickly changed into jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed his tea, and headed next door, ready to meet Agnes and her world-famous cookies. He found Agnes sitting in a comfortable armchair, a colorful afghan draped over her legs. Sarah was kneeling beside her, whispering something that made Agnes chuckle. As David approached, Agnes looked up, her eyes twinkling with warmth. So, you're the handsome young man Sarah dragged over here, Agnes said, her voice surprisingly strong. She tells me you're a painter. David smiled. That's right, Agnes. It's a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure's all mine, Agnes replied. Although I must say, Sarah could have given me a bit more warning. I haven't had a chance to put on my good pearls. Sarah laughed. You look beautiful, Grandma. Besides, David's not judging your fashion choices. David helped Agnes with a few tasks around the living room, reaching a book from a high shelf and moving a small table closer to her chair. As they worked, they chatted about his paintings, Agnes's love for gardening, and surprisingly, a shared love for old movies. You know, I'm a big fan of Casablanca, David mentioned, surprised that the topic had come up. Agnes's eyes widened. Casablanca? Oh, it's a classic. Do you know all the lines? Well, I know a few, David admitted. Play it again, Sam, Agnes recited dramatically, her voice filled with emotion. David grinned. Of all the gin joints, in all the towns, in all the world, she walks into mine. They both laughed, a comfortable silence settling between them. It was clear they had found a connection, a shared appreciation for the beauty and nostalgia of the past. The initial awkwardness of the encounter had completely vanished, replaced by a genuine sense of camaraderie. Even Sarah seemed surprised by how well they were getting along. You know, David said, after Agnes had gone to the kitchen to check on her cookies, I haven't felt this relaxed in ages. I usually spend Tuesdays cooped up in my studio, painting and avoiding the outside world. Sarah, who had been quietly observing them, smiled. So, you're admitting that I shook things up a little? David chuckled. I suppose I am. But in a good way. I needed this. I lost my parents a few years ago, and since then, it's just been me and my paintings. It's easy to get stuck in a rut. He hadn't intended to share something so personal, but the words just tumbled out. Sarah's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that, David. It must be tough. He shrugged. It is what it is. But helping Agnes, it feels good. Like I'm doing something worthwhile. He paused, a little embarrassed by his own vulnerability. Anyway, enough about me. Tell me about you, Sarah. What do you do when you're not barging into strangers' houses and forcing them to help your grandma? Sarah laughed, the sound light and airy. I'm a student. I'm studying photography at the local college. I love capturing moments, telling stories through pictures. That's amazing, David said, genuinely impressed. Maybe you could take some pictures of my paintings sometime. I'm terrible at photographing them myself. Maybe I will, Sarah said, her eyes twinkling. But only if you promise to tell me all the stories behind them. Agnes returned, carrying a plate piled high with golden brown cookies. The aroma filled the room, making David's stomach rumble. Here you go, dearies, Agnes said, offering the plate. Fresh out of the oven. Try them and tell me what you think. David took a cookie and bit into it. It was heavenly, warm, chewy, and bursting with flavor. These are incredible, Agnes, he exclaimed, his mouth full. I told you, Sarah said, grinning. Grandma's cookies are the best. As David savored the cookie, Agnes turned to Sarah, a mischievous glint in her eye. You know, dear, I was just telling David about that time you tried to convince me that you were a fairy princess. Sarah groaned. Grandma, please don't embarrass me. Agnes chuckled. Oh, it's a good story. David should hear it. David, sensing an opportunity to tease Sarah, leaned forward with interest. A fairy princess, huh? I'm all ears. Sarah rolled her eyes. It was when I was, like, 5 years old. I had this ridiculous costume, and I was convinced I could fly. I even tried to jump off the roof. Agnes gasped dramatically. She almost broke her leg. I had to catch her. David laughed. Wow, you were a brave little fairy princess. He paused, then added, So, that explains the shake things up attitude. You've always been a bit of a daredevil. Sarah's expression suddenly changed. Actually, she said, her voice turning serious, that's not really why I said that. I thought, well, when I saw you in your robe, I thought maybe you were a little lonely. And maybe a little bored. David felt a wave of awkwardness wash over him. Was that what she really thought of him? A lonely, bored guy in a robe? He suddenly felt self-conscious, remembering his disheveled appearance when she first arrived. Oh, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I see. Just as David was trying to formulate a response, a loud knock echoed through Agnes's house. That must be my art supplies! David exclaimed, a wave of relief washing over him. The delivery had impeccable timing. Agnes chuckled. Well, go on, dear. We wouldn't want your new paints to get cold. David stood up, grateful for the interruption. I'll be right back, he said, heading towards the door. He opened it to find Mr. Henderson, the delivery driver, holding a stack of boxes. Sorry I'm late, David, Mr. Henderson said with a friendly smile. Had a bit of a mix-up at the depot. No worries, Mr. Henderson, David replied, taking the boxes. Perfect timing, actually. As he carried the boxes back into Agnes's living room, he couldn't help but notice Sarah's expression. She seemed a little flustered, almost as if she regretted what she had said. Here, let me help you with those, Sarah offered, taking a box from his hands. Thanks, David said, his voice still a little strained. He placed the boxes on the floor, feeling a renewed sense of awkwardness. The delivery, which he had been so eagerly anticipating, had suddenly become an unwelcome intrusion, a reminder of his ordinary, predictable life. Agnes, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, cleared her throat. Well, now that David's art supplies are here, I suppose it's time for me to take a little nap. All this excitement has worn me out. Sarah looked at David, a silent question in her eyes. I should probably get going too, she said softly. I have some studying to do. David walked Sarah to the door, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. He wasn't sure what he wanted to happen, but he knew he wasn't ready for her to leave. Thank you for helping, Agnes, Sarah said, her voice soft. She really appreciated it. It was my pleasure. David replied, forcing a smile. I enjoyed spending time with her, and with you. Sarah hesitated, then reached out and gently touched his arm. Don't think too much about what I said earlier, she said. About you being lonely and bored. It was just a first impression. I can see now that there's more to you than that. David's heart fluttered. I hope so, he said, his eyes meeting hers. Maybe we could do this again sometime? Sarah suggested, her cheeks flushing slightly. Help Agnes, I mean. Or maybe just grab a coffee. Talk about Casablanca. David's smile widened. I'd like that very much, he said. Okay, Sarah replied, a relieved smile spreading across her face. I'll text you. She turned and walked towards her grandma's house, leaving David standing at the door, watching her go. He felt a surge of optimism, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Sarah's visit had been unexpected, chaotic, and a little bit awkward, but it had also been invigorating. As he turned back inside, he caught a glimpse of Agnes peering at him from the window, a knowing smile on her face. He couldn't help but laugh. It seemed like his quiet Tuesday had turned into something much more interesting, thanks to a meddling grandmother, a brave fairy princess, and a whole lot of delicious cookies. Back in his own house, David surveyed the boxes of art supplies, now stacked neatly in his studio. He should be excited, eager to unpack the new canvases and experiment with the fresh paints. But his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. He replayed their conversation in his head, analyzing every word, every gesture. Had she really thought he was lonely and bored? Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. He had been isolating himself, hiding away in his studio, letting his grief consume him. But Sarah had seen something more in him, something worth shaking up. And he, in turn, had been drawn to her energy, her confidence, her genuine kindness. She had a way of making him feel alive again, like anything was possible. He picked up his phone, hesitating for a moment before opening his contacts. He didn't have Sarah's number, of course. She had said she would text him. But what if she changed her mind? What if she decided he was too boring after all? He shook his head, chiding himself for his insecurity. He needed to be patient. He needed to trust that she would reach out. And if she didn't, well, he would find a way to see her again. He knew Agnes lived next door, after all. He glanced at the clock. It was almost lunchtime. Maybe he should start unpacking those art supplies. Maybe he should try to get back to his routine. But as he reached for a box cutter, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Hey David, it's Sarah. Casablanca coffee or Agnes's cookies? Your choice. David grinned. His Tuesday was far from over. David quickly typed a reply. Casablanca and cookies. Can't resist Agnes's baking. He pressed send, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he waited for Sarah's response, he wandered over to his easel, a fresh canvas waiting to be transformed. He stared at the blank surface, trying to decide what to paint. Usually, he had a clear vision, a specific image in mind. But today, his thoughts were too jumbled, too full of Sarah and her unexpected arrival. He decided to start with color, swirling blues and greens onto the canvas, mimicking the vibrant hues of Agnes's garden. He added touches of gold, inspired by the warmth of her cookies and the sparkle in Sarah's eyes. He found himself painting a landscape, but it wasn't just any landscape. It was a landscape filled with hope, with a sense of possibility, with the promise of adventure. His phone buzzed again. Great choice. I'll grab the movie. Be over in 10? Perfect, David replied, a wide smile spreading across his face. He quickly washed his hands, feeling a renewed sense of energy. He glanced at his reflection in the mirror, noticing that his eyes seemed brighter, his smile more genuine. He couldn't wait to see Sarah again, to hear her laugh, to learn more about her world. He knew that their connection was just beginning, but he had a feeling it was going to be something special. Something worth shaking up his entire life for. He tidied up the living room, putting away the art supplies and fluffing the pillows on the couch. He wanted everything to be perfect, just in case this was the start of something truly amazing. He heard a knock at the door, a gentle rap that sent a shiver of excitement down his spine. He took a deep breath, smoothed his hair, and walked towards the entrance, a confident smile on his face. As he reached for the doorknob, he paused, remembering something. He glanced down at his clothes, realizing he was still wearing the jeans and t-shirt he had changed into earlier. But something was missing. He turned back to his bedroom and retrieved his old, soft robe, the one his sister said made him look like a friendly bear. He slipped it on, feeling a sense of comfort and familiarity wash over him. He tied the belt loosely around his waist, not too tight, not too loose. Just right. He looked at himself in the mirror one last time, a smile playing on his lips. He was still David, the home-based painter, the fan of old movies, the slightly awkward guy who liked his routine. But he was also something more now. He was someone who was open to adventure, someone who was ready to be shaken up, someone who was excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. He walked back to the door and opened it, revealing Sarah standing on his porch, a DVD of Casablanca in her hand and a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Ready for some cookies and classic cinema?" she asked, her voice filled with warmth. David grinned. "Born ready," he replied, stepping aside to let her in. And as Sarah walked through the doorway, David finally pulled the edges of his robe together, closing it securely around him. Not because he was embarrassed or ashamed, but because he was finally comfortable in his own skin, ready to embrace whatever the future held, robe and all. His Tuesday, and his life, had been forever changed.